The first sign came quietly, a system alert I hadn't triggered. My access had been revoked for 10 seconds. Not long enough to block me, just long enough to make a point. I stared at the screen, red flashing, once then gone. 10 seconds isn't a glitch. It's a message. And by the time Carter Bell called me into his office, I already knew something was shifting. He wore that polished smile executives use when they want you to believe everything's fine while they set the fire behind you. "Delaney," he said casually, like we went way back. "Meet Drew Keller. Brilliant guy. Stanford MBA. He's the future of risk compliance." The words future of hung in the air like the scent of ozone before a storm. I'd spent 8 years building this risk matrix at Branton Analytics, coding every exception flag, fixing gaps nobody else dared touch. Risk compliance isn't flashy, but it's the nervous system of the company. Cut it wrong and the whole body twitches. For 8 years, I kept it steady. And now, here stood Drew. Hair-perfect handshake, aggressive smile, straight off a recruitment brochure. 24, maybe. The kind of guy who thinks Excel formulas are beneath him. "Looking forward to learning everything you do," he said, like it was a formality, like I was a stepping stone. "You two make a strong team," Carter added, smirking, like a hawk and a mouse. He didn't say which was which, but I heard it loud and clear. I nodded, smiled, played the part, but back at my desk something waited. A folder on the shared drive. One no intern should touch. Archived Awkward Reviews 2020. My notes, my access credentials. Drew's name in the log, time-stamped. That wasn't onboarding, that was surveillance. Access wasn't an accident. It was the first move. It wasn't onboarding, it was reconnaissance. An invitation to a war they didn't realize I'd already started. Drew had asked me earlier, how long would it take to automate integrity? I smiled. Forever. He leaned over my desk like he owned it. His tie loosened, his sleeves rolled, that calculated look, half genius, half chill tech, bro. "Seriously, Delaney," he said, tapping on my screen like we were co-pilots. "Why don't we streamline the whole thing AI plug-in? Let the algorithm handle approvals. Instant compliance." I kept my tone level. Compliance isn't arithmetic. It's legal judgment, risk mitigation, human context. He nodded, smirked. Like I was an old encyclopedia in a TikTok world. Every word from him came with subtext. "Your relic. I'm the upgrade." I walked him through the routing logic. Exception thresholds, the framework I'd built over 8 years, designed to catch fraud before it poisoned the books. He nodded, typed, sloppily. Fast hands, no care, no clue. "Wouldn't this be faster with API integration?" he asked 5 minutes later. "Faster isn't safer," I said. Then came the trap. What if we skip dual authorization on small transactions? Add dynamic flags later to balance the risk. My smile froze. Dynamic flags. That phrase was buried deep in Branton's legacy playbook. Obscure. Internal use only. Most directors didn't even know it. I looked at Drew, really looked. He didn't blink, just kept typing. Like he hadn't just detonated a mine between us. Then Carter's voice slid into the space behind me. "How's our star doing?" he asked, leaning on my cubicle wall. Coffee in hand, eyes scanning the code like he understood it. "Eager to learn," I said without turning. "Good," Carter replied too quickly. "Too smooth. You've got a lot of institutional knowledge, Delaney. Make sure he can follow it. We don't want to slow progress." Carter's voice coded the phrase in charm, but the weight behind it landed like lead. A corporate warning disguised as encouragement. I nodded once, face neutral. Inside, though, a line had been drawn sharp and deep across my patience. Drew wasn't just inquisitive. He was prepared, scripted. And Carter? He wasn't improvising. He was engineering the entire play, smiling like a man confident the ending had already been written. When they finally walked away, I sat frozen, fingers poised on the keyboard, pulse calm but tightly wound. If Drew knew the term dynamic flags, he also knew the implications. If Carter gave it to him, they weren't just replacing me, they were rewiring the system in secret. This wasn't confidence. It was desperation hiding in a tailored suit. Betrayal doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers over jazz and porcelain. The restaurant was one of those upscale downtown places, glass walls, pristine floors, and candlelight bouncing off white linen like liquid gold. A string trio played near the back, just loud enough to blur private conversations. But not for me. I listened differently. Carter held the door like he was auditioning for elegance, smiling too wide. Drew trailed behind, overdressed and overly confident, still glowing from his Ivy League baptism. And then there was Mr. Liang, regional CEO. Navy suit, silver cufflinks, face carved from corporate stone. He nodded once as I took my seat. No warmth, no dismissal, just stillness. The waiter arrived with menus I didn't bother to open. Carter ordered for the table. Too fast, too proud. Like he believed control could be expressed through wine pairings. I kept my posture perfect, chin high. If this was theater, I wouldn't be the understudy. Buzzwords drifted like perfume, agility, compliance, digitization. I let them pass, then reached for my tea. Jasmine. Steeped just right. I breathed it in like armor, because I already knew what they didn't. They were about to trigger the one protocol I built for betrayal. Then it happened. A single sentence, spoken just low enough to hide beneath the cello's sigh. She doesn't know we'll fire her after this lunch. Shame. She looks loyal. My teacup hovered midair. For a beat, my fingers forgot how to move. The world didn't spin, didn't explode. It simply narrowed to the soft clink of glass, the curl of steam from my jasmine, the weight of words they never expected me to understand. Carter grinned like he'd said something clever. Mr. Liang. He didn't blink, just nodded. Expression unreadable, his silence more damning than applause. Drew, of course, smiled completely unaware, laughing at a joke he never heard. I set my cup down with care, lifted it again, sipped. Because what Carter didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I'd lived in Taipei for 4 years. Earned my master's at National Chengchi, audited pensions for multinationals across Asia in fluent Mandarin. Carter barely manages English in a boardroom. I understood every word. And in that instant, something inside me crystallized. This wasn't speculation. It was confirmation. The moment Drew walked in with a smile and a fake question about AI, I knew. This lunch was never about bonding. It was a burial. I didn't flinch. I didn't speak. I just filed the words like evidence marked sealed, preserved. Because language wasn't their secret weapon. It was mine. He thought speaking Mandarin was a wall. He never realized I'd built that wall and carved my name into the bricks. That night, my silence wasn't hesitation. It was the first step. The drive home blurred past in streaks of city light and betrayal. She looks loyal. Let them think that. They just killed my loyalty. What came next wouldn't be rage. It would be record-keeping. At 10:43 p.m., I opened my laptop. Named a new folder, Operation Glass Wall. Because walls don't just block. They reveal. And soon, they'd see exactly what they built reflected back at them. Every flaw, every lie, every digital fingerprint on the weapon they were crafting to erase me now captured. Step 1, control the narrative. If Carter wanted Drew to learn the system, then every file Drew touched would write his story for me. I embedded a silent listener deep in the approval engine. No alerts, no logs, no noise, just quiet forwarding, every edit, every download, every 2 a.m. sandbox experiment, all routed to an encrypted drive known only to me. Then I expanded the net. Slack threads, vendor audit logs, risk mitigation channels. I mirrored everything. Each time Drew accessed a report that wasn't his, it bounced straight into my archive, clean, time-stamped, irrefutable. And as the code blinked across my screen, the irritation I'd swallowed all week condensed into something sharper, colder. It didn't take long. At 11:42 p.m., the first alert pulsed. Vendor. Reviews. 20/20 access granted. Drew Keller. Predictable. Then a second ping. Admin override. Bell.Carter. I stared at the screen. Steady breath, calm hands. Carter hadn't just handed Drew a key. He opened the vault himself, an act that shattered every internal policy we'd sworn to uphold. He signed his own name on the same digital knife he thought would cut me out. I leaned back. Let the gravity settle. They weren't training Drew to replace me. If you're ready for the next chapter and believe stories like this, deserve to be heard, hit subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. They were trying to erase me and dismantle everything I'd built, but now I had proof. Tangible, time-stamped, undeniable. At 12:17 a.m., I closed my laptop. The city still hummed outside my window. Carter wanted war disguised as diplomacy. Fine. I'd give him silence so perfect it would feel like stillness, right before it collapsed. They wanted transparency, I'd deliver it, just not the way they expected. Every fall begins with a temptation. Mine was a legacy file, labeled in Mandarin. Vendor compliance and test. DSTL 2020 buried in plain sight. A file no intern should ever touch, unless they were searching for something they shouldn't. I didn't send an email, didn't drop a hint in Slack. I just let the file sit, like broken glass glinting at the bottom of a clear pond. The Mandarin label was no accident. It was phase 1, vendor verification, legacy format. To most, it looked like a dusty remnant from an outdated audit cycle. But anyone who opened it would find layered columns, threshold, data approval, logic encryption tags. Half authentic, half synthetic. Just convincing enough to look legitimate, just complex enough to lure Drew into the snare. And right on schedule, he took the bait. 11:42 p.m. My encrypted dashboard blinked. Access granted. User Keller. Drew. 2 minutes later, another alert. File copied to local desktop. My pulse stayed flat, my hands steady. The screen cast a soft blue glow across my desk as the digital trail mapped itself. Every click was a confession. Then the second log appeared and I leaned in. Read it twice. Admin override. User Bell.Carter timestamp. 11:43 p.m. He hadn't just given permission. He'd used his executive credentials to unlock it personally. A direct violation of every security policy in our handbook. A breach that carried termination-level consequences. And the best part, the system had captured everything. Session IDs, IP addresses, access duration, chain of custody, all signed in their own names. I clicked the file once more and let the metadata unfurl like a blueprint of betrayal. Carter thought he was choreographing a smooth succession plan, handing Drew the keys to everything I built. What he didn't know was that each step buried them deeper into a permanent record no one could scrub. By 12:15 a.m., the auto-forwarding was complete. Logs, screenshots, timestamps securely tucked into Operation Glass Wall, a silent surgical archive of arrogance. I shut the laptop slowly. No thrill, no rush, only the cold certainty of strategy well deployed. They believed speed was their edge. They never saw patience coming, far enough to hang themselves with the rope they thought I'd never notice. The moment Drew copied that file, he wasn't learning, he was tying the noose. Some mistakes whisper, others echo through boardrooms. Thursday's compliance meeting started like any other. Polished slides, tight smiles, the low hum of fluorescent lights trying to drown out the tension thickening in the room. I sat at the far end of the long mahogany table. Notes neatly stacked, face unreadable, movements intentional. Anyone watching would have assumed I was detached. But under the surface, a storm-churned calm, only an appearance. Carter started with his usual performative tone, slick scripted confidence he hadn't earned. "We've been working on modernizing our processes," he said, gesturing toward Drew like a proud coach. "Fresh ideas, smarter automation." Drew leaned forward, grinning like the room was already his. "Absolutely." For example, we've applied FTL thresholds to the recent vendor batch, keeping us ahead on compliance. The words landed like a spark in dry timber. FTL thresholds, my phrase. A term buried in the decoy file Drew had no business opening. I felt heat climb my spine, but I didn't react. Not yet. Across the table, Charlotte from legal raised an eyebrow. FTL, she asked casually. What exactly does that measure? Drew blinked, the grin faltered. Fingers gripped the tablet like it might rescue him. Tied to invoice limits? He muttered. Silence. Charlotte tilted her head. Interesting, she said. I've never seen that in our compliance framework. Carter jumped in too fast. Too loud. It's part of our new agility model, he said, nodding like a bobblehead under pressure. Forward thinking. We're streamlining. Charlotte's lips curled slightly. Not a smile. More like the expression someone makes when they smell smoke but haven't found the fire yet. But I had. And the match had a name, FTL. Not approval. That curve on Charlotte's lips said something else entirely. It said, I smell smoke. But Carter didn't notice. He kept talking, piling buzzwords like sandbags against a flood he didn't see coming. I stayed perfectly still. Every movement deliberate, my pulse steady, controlled. While he rambled, I logged every syllable in silence, because this wasn't just arrogance. It was evidence. Proof Drew wasn't learning our systems. He was reciting lines from a script he didn't understand. And Carter, he was the one holding the pen. When the meeting ended, Carter clapped Drew's shoulder, like they just nailed a TED Talk, not fumbled a public confession. I gathered my notes without a word, slid my pen into its leather sleeve like a knife returning to its sheath. I didn't need to speak. I didn't need to challenge them. The trap was no longer theory, it was alive. Breathing, closing tighter with every careless word. One fabricated term, one reckless intern. I didn't have to light the fire. They were already burning. That morning smelled like citrus cologne and panic. Carter caught me before I'd finished my coffee. His voice carried the hollow cheer of a man trying to pretend his world wasn't unraveling. Delaney, he said, leaning against the conference room doorframe like he owned it. Got a sec? I followed him in. He closed the door softly, like manners could mask manipulation. Just wanted to check in. He began dropping into a chair. Elbows on knees, smile too wide, too polished. You've been quiet lately. I met his gaze. Calm? Even? Busy, I said. Right? He replied. Voice? Just a beat too quick. Listen, Drew's brilliant, really sharp, but he needs your help. He hesitated, searching for the right spin. Make it easier. Break things down. Speed it up. There it was. Not a request. An order in business casual wrapping. I folded my hands. Of course, I said, silk smooth. But inside steel. Carter straightened, smiled that hollow corporate smile, and delivered the final twist of the knife. I knew I could count on you, Delaney, he said. Always a team player. I smiled, but not with my teeth. If he'd been paying attention, he might have noticed the voltage building behind my eyes. But Carter wasn't looking for a threat. He was looking for obedience. And men obsessed with control, they never see the storm until it hits. By the time I returned to my desk, the announcement was already live. Subject Project Phoenix. A new era of compliance recipients, executive leadership, strategy team, legal, everyone who mattered. I opened it, read every smug line. We're redefining risk compliance for the future, it began. Thanks to Drew Keller's innovative approach, we're streamlining systems to enhance agility and reduce redundancy. My name, one mention. A footnote. Special thanks to Delaney Shaw for her foundational contributions. Foundational like old concrete they were about to bulldoze. I stared at the screen. No reaction on the surface, but inside fury rippled beneath polished calm. They weren't hiding anymore. They were broadcasting it. Pitching my erasure as evolution, but desperation. It has a pattern. It rushes, it stumbles. And Carter had just broken into a sprint toward his own collapse. I closed the email. The corners of my mouth barely moved. They wanted speed. I'd show them what happens when you run too fast on a crumbling floor. Then it landed. A file dropped into my inbox like a live grenade. Subject, vendor reconciliation. From Drew Keller, CC legal timestamp, 9:31 a.m. I opened it slowly, like unwrapping poison. Inside, a reconciliation report for a vendor we'd blacklisted after 3 flagged violations. Approval threshold slashed by 40%. Risk exposure wide open. And the note, short, polite, lethal. Updated per Delaney's recent changes. I didn't blink, but my fingers were already moving, pulling metadata. Because that email wasn't a mistake. It was a setup, and I had the receipt. Implementing Delaney's recent adjustments for expedited processing. That line sat there like a landmine. My pulse didn't spike. My hands stayed steady. I just stared at the screen, breathing even. As the world narrowed into one cutting truth. They weren't just replacing me. They were framing me. If this report backfired, if legal caught even a whiff of fraud, my name was already written into the narrative. Drew didn't come up with this alone. He wasn't bold enough to improvise falsified data with legal copied in, which meant Carter was pulling the strings just like always. I dragged the file into my sandbox and broke it down line by line. Metadata doesn't lie. Under Drew's edits, I found what I was expecting. Bell.Carter admin override, 9:12 a.m. He had unlocked permissions, altered parameters, and left his credentials glowing across the log like a flare. Drew followed 12 minutes later, applying changes Carter had pre-approved. I leaned back, stared at the ceiling, let the rage simmer into something colder, sharper. This wasn't panic. Panic is clumsy. This was precision. Every move they made tightened a trap they couldn't see. I saved the metadata, compressed it, tucked it into Operation Glass Wall, filed it beside Drew's midnight file grab, Carter's override logs. Then I took a screenshot of the email, per Delaney's recent changes. If anyone questioned intent, I wouldn't need to say a word. The evidence would speak for itself, and louder than anything I could ever say. Across the aisle, Drew laughed at something on his phone. Head tilted, carefree, Carter's office door was cracked. I could see his silhouette pacing behind the frosted glass, phone pressed to his ear. They thought they were building momentum. They were building a coffin. Then my inbox pinged. Subject, quick sync. Phoenix rollout. From Carter Bell. Want to align, the word tasted like ash. He wasn't inviting me to the table. He was asking me to bless my own execution. He wasn't asking for input. He was asking me to bless my own execution. I closed the email. Fingers steady. Mind colder than steel. They believed they were untouchable. That I'd fold quietly, just another casualty dressed up as progress. They were wrong. They didn't just cross a line. They drew a target on my back. Wrong move. In corporate war, you don't raise your voice. You lower it, just enough to land in the right ear. By the time the office emptied, I was still at my desk, bathed in the soft glow of 2 monitors. The report Carter had paraded in the morning sat open. Beside it, the raw metadata I'd stripped from its bones. His override credentials. Drew's edit trail. My name falsely stamped as the source. It wasn't suspicion, it was proof. And noise wouldn't save me. Drama is messy. Precision. Precision topples empires. So I opened a new email. No subject line. Typed carefully in Mandarin, Mr. Liang, I've identified several procedural adjustments being attributed to my office without authorization. Attached are examples for your review. These files did not pass proper compliance and may pose reputational risk if elevated to final. Please advise. I attached 3 files. Drew's falsified reconciliation. Carter's 9:12 a.m. override. The midnight access log. Evidence sharp enough to cut packaged in velvet. I didn't plead. I didn't accuse. I expressed concern because in boardrooms, concern is more powerful than outrage. At 10:58 p.m., his reply landed. Just 1 line. Understood. Keep documenting. No greeting. No signature. but I knew exactly what it meant. Silence from the top isn't negligence. It's strategy. I pushed my chair back, exhaled, then turned to phase 2. Because Liang could tug the thread, but the real power, she held the loom. Mayu Tanaka, special assistant to the global CEO. The one name that made executives sweat more than subpoenas, more than headlines. Because Mayu Tanaka didn't speak often. But when she did, men like Carter Bell vanished from org charts overnight. I opened a fresh message. No fluff. No signature. No noise. Attached the entire Operation Glass Wall dossier. Every document, every log. Translated twice, once in precise business Mandarin. Once in formal Japanese. Clean. Exact. Enough to slip past Tokyo's filters like water through silk. Subject compliance irregularities. Immediate attention. Recommended. In the body. One sentence. Please review the attached files. Discrepancies between policy and implementation appear significant. I hit send at 11:42 p.m. The hum of my system felt like a pulse under the keys. Then I waited. 5 minutes later, my inbox pinged. 2 words. No greeting, no punctuation. I see. Cold. Clean. Heavier than any threat Carter could throw. I leaned back in my chair, eyes softening just slightly. A smile curved faint and quiet. Because when power moves in silence, it doesn't shout. It erases. When power moves in silence, careers don't explode. They dissolve. Some endings roar. Mine. It began with a smile I didn't return. The next morning, Carter logged into the global Zoom call like a man delivering a keynote. Executives filled the screen. New York. Singapore. Tokyo. His hair was perfect. Tie red enough to scream dominance. Drew hovered just off center. Posture stiff, smile thin, eyes scanning every frame like a man bracing for something he couldn't name. Thank you all for joining. Carter began, voice polished like an award speech. Today we're proud to present our progress on Project Phoenix, a revolution in compliance modernization. Streamlined, agile, future-ready. He launched the screen share before anyone could interrupt. Slides flipped like a magician's cards, charts, graphs, buzzwords. But the real magic, it hadn't started yet. Buzzwords tumbled across the screen. Then, on slide 3, a bold headline, Phoenix Flow by Drew Keller. My name one line, faint gray, foundational support from Delaney Shaw, foundational, like the crumbling concrete beneath a building they'd already set fire to. Carter leaned forward, voice swelling with pride. Drew's vision has propelled us ahead of schedule, he said. This is the future of compliance, ladies and gentlemen. Then came Mayu's voice, calm, precise. Before we proceed, she said I'd like to review a few concerns. The screen flickered, shifted. For one breathless beat, Carter looked confused. Then it appeared. Operation Glass Wall in bold white letters. The silence wasn't passive. It was surgical. One click. The first file opened. An admin override at 9:12 a.m. Bell. Carter, click. Drew's midnight access of a restricted audit file. Click. A reconciliation report risk threshold slashed by 40%. My name listed as author falsely. Click. A screenshot of Carter's email. Let's fast-track these changes. Keep Delaney out for now. Drew's face went pale. Carter shifted, smile splintering. His words stumbled. These files, Mayu cut him off, her tone like glass. Is this the context? She asked. Another click. The Phoenix pitch deck appeared again, except now. Quotes attributed to me were highlighted against my original emails. Time-stamped, years apart, different words, different meanings. The room stayed silent. Tokyo, New York. Even the hum of the server line felt like judgment. Then, Mr. Liang spoke for the first time. Effective immediately, he said. Carter Bell is placed on administrative leave pending external audit. Drew Keller's internship is concluded. His voice didn't rise. It didn't have to. Before the call ended, my inbox pinged. A new message from Tokyo HQ, signed Offer Director of Global Risk Compliance. I read it once. then smiled just enough for me. Reporting directly to Mayu Tanaka. Carter stared at the screen like a man watching his own obituary scroll by. Drew didn't move. I looked straight into the camera. Face calm, voice low, and in flawless Mandarin I said, "You thought I didn't understand." I remembered every word. The call ended with a click. My reflection lingered for a breath. Then the screen went black. Revenge doesn't scream. It speaks fluently. For years I believed silence was weakness, that in a cutthroat world, survival meant shrinking, accepting, adapting, swallowing the injustice. But this taught me something else. Silence can be power. When it's chosen. Power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, plans, waits, and strikes at the exact moment it will echo loudest. If you've ever been overlooked, underestimated, or pushed to the sidelines, I want you to hear this. Your worth isn't defined by people who fail to see it. It's defined by the work you've done, by the standards you refuse to lower, and by the courage it takes to reclaim your power when the world thinks it's already taken it from you. Every betrayal I faced in this story was a signal. Every locked door was a blueprint, not for defeat, but for an exit they couldn't control. When the moment came, I didn't rage. I didn't burn bridges. I brought clarity, because the truth, when wielded precisely, cuts deeper than any raised voice. If you've made it to this point, I want to thank you, not just for watching, but for listening, for sitting with the silence, for hearing what too many of us are told to ignore. I didn't share this for sympathy. I shared it for those who've been there, for anyone who's worked in the shadows while someone else took the credit, for anyone who stayed quiet because speaking up felt like lighting a match in a room full of gas. I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below. Tell me what you've survived. Tell me about the moment you realized your silence wasn't weakness, it was strategy. Or if you're still in it, still feeling unseen or underestimated, tell me that too. I'll read every single one, because your voice matters, and maybe today's the day it gets heard. If this story felt familiar, if it reminded you of a time when you swallowed your pride just to stay employed, then share it. Someone in your circle might need it more than you know. Someone might still be sitting at their desk in the dark, wondering if they're the only one. Here's my advice: don't confuse humility with invisibility. You don't owe your silence to people who erase you. You owe yourself the dignity of being seen. You can be calm and still powerful. You can be quiet and still unforgettable. And when the time comes to speak, speak with evidence, with clarity, with purpose. And don't forget subscribe if you want more stories like this, not just for entertainment, but for validation, for strategy, for strength, because this story wasn't just mine. It was a mirror, and maybe it's yours too.